All dogs go to heaven, and as such, they shouldn't have to go to church. But after mounting homelessness arose in this Brazilian city, one man stepped up to make sure that even the stray dogs around him had food and shelter. This pastor has made sure that his canine friends are never excluded, even from Sunday Mass. As Edie Brickell said, "Religion is the smile on a dog." Sadly, this dog is one of many who can be found along the streets of this Brazilian city, without a home or food. Because of the mounting problems of homelessness in the city, the dogs are sadly not the first priority for citizens. But that doesn't mean that some people living in the city don't have hearts of gold, as you'll read about below. Gravata has a real problem with stray dogs. Many are left malnourished and without proper shelter, suffering because they're not receiving the care they deserve. But this city is also home to some of the kindest and best-intentioned people who have devoted their lives to giving care to every creature. Obviously malnourished, this dog relies on the kindness of passers-by and strangers who occasionally treat him to a meal or a few extra bites of food. But, for this dog's life, he had not had an owner who he could rely on to take care of him. That is, until one kind man stepped in and changed this dog's life forever. It's easy to turn a blind eye to the stray dogs in your town when there are also homeless people on the streets. Sadly, not just kindness can bring an end to the poverty in this city, but one man proved that you can make a difference with small, kind actions. Sometimes all it takes to make a difference in a creature's life is to give a little attention and care to them instead of overlooking them. Among this group of men is Paulo Gomes, who will prove below to be a saint among men. Paulo Gomes, pictured above, devoted his spare time to taking care of the stray dogs he met on the streets of Brazil. This dog particularly caught his heart and repaid all of the love that was shown to him tenfold. And that would prove to be in both of their favors. This pup had never had a forever home, let alone a bath. Thankfully, Gomes and his friends took the time out of their day to make sure this dog was well taken care of and didn't have any lasting injuries or illnesses from his time on the streets. What happens next will really warm your heart. Gomes also treated this pup to his first ever trip to a veterinarian. They found that the dog was perfectly healthy, but had a bit of wear and tear from his rough past. But it was nothing that time, food and shelter couldn't fix. Thankfully, this dog would never have to return to the streets because his new home would be better than he could imagine. Gomes has taken in several stray dogs and given them the care they need, which includes trips to the vets for all. But how can he afford to care for so many animals? With his devoted friends alongside him and the support of his church, this Brazilian priest has proven that anything is possible. In an effort to address this injustice, Father Gomes has made it his mission to care for and foster as many stray dogs as he can. This even means bringing them inside his home, even when it doesn't seem like there is enough room for everyone. When necessary, Gomes pays for the dogs he rescues to receive medical treatment. A lot of them suffer from some very serious conditions, so keeping strays healthy is no small task for the earnest man of God. So, who looks after the more sickly animals? Father Gomes' efforts have already made a significant difference. Many stray dogs in Gravata have been successfully rehoused, and many others have been healed of significant injuries and illnesses. Some of the stray dogs have even found homes with other members of the church. Father Gomes knows he can't care for all of Gravata's stray dogs alone, so he's come up with a smart way to get his congregation to help out. He has incorporated willing dogs into his Sunday worship. Every Sunday, the local church, Paroquia de Santana Gravata, plays host to any number of strays. In addition to lounging around within the chapel, they even take part in sermons and ceremonies as part of Father Gomes' master plan. Father João Paulo Araujo Gomes serves the parish of Santana in Gravata, Brazil. His ministry is different to most holy men, because he's made it his mission not just to help wayward humans, but also wayward dogs. In an effort to help serve stray dogs within his community, Father Gomes invites them into his chapel whenever possible, including giving them place of pride in his regular Sabbath services. The dogs aren't just in the services for show. Father Gomes hopes that his congregation will be moved by their plight, and will offer to adopt them, giving them the forever homes they deserve. It's for this reason that Gomes insists that the dogs be given a place of prominence within his services, so that people will feel inspired to do something kindhearted as a result of their Sabbath worship. The rest of the week, the chapel is still an open and inviting home to any stray that might wander in. Father Gomes wants every dog to have a place to find shelter and nourishment. According to Gomes, they will always be able to enter, sleep, eat, drink their water and find shelter and protection, for this house is of God and they are of God. Father Gomes also practices what he preaches. He's adopted several of the more severely sick dogs himself, and has helped nurse them back to health. Now, they live with him in his home and sleep in his bed at night. Father Gomes considers his ministry to Gravata's dog population to be an extension of his ministry to humans under his care. After all, he argues, we are all God's creatures. Says Gomes, if I'm the greatest sinner I can enter, imagine these four-legged angels. Nobody touches my protected. And who can argue with that? It's hard to argue with this line of thought, and Gomes certainly has won his fair share of admirers for his efforts, both within his local congregation and further afield. After a post on social media about Gomes' efforts went viral, the father was inundated with messages of love and appreciation. Many called him a true hero for his efforts to help those who were otherwise overlooked. Of course, the dogs who attend Father Gomes' sermons are always eager to share their love with others. It's not uncommon for dogs to sit happily with various families in the congregation during a service, receiving affection and belly rubs. It's clear that Father Gomes is a real animal lover, having successfully helped so many pets in need, and even invited a few into his home permanently. This example of love and charity is worth 1,000 sermons. Father Gomes isn't even the only religious leader to form a connection with animals as a result of his work. Everyone in his parish, and even further afield, needs to be prepared to help out a four-footed friend in need. Father Gomes' work with his canine followers makes him a modern-day Francis of Assisi in the eyes of his supporters. He's certainly following the spirit of Christian teaching, reaching out to the poor and needy. Perhaps not everyone is quite as big a fan of stray dogs as Father Gomes. This, if anything, simply proves that nobody, no matter how worn down or desperate, is beyond being rescued. Plus, what better use for a large chapel when it's not filled with people? With worship services only taking place one day a week, it makes sense to open up the building to those in need. Of course, the dogs don't need much to be happy. It's enough to simply have a little shelter, and some food and water. Plus the occasional scratch behind the ear. If you enjoyed this story, wait for our next story starting in 10 seconds. Rich was right there by her side when the accident happened. He was able to support Charmin until the couple got to the station. He helped her until the seizures ended. Little did he realize, their problems were only beginning. I remember at one point I was left on my own with him and hated it. I didn't know him, but he was acting like we were in love. This is Jessica Charmin and Rich Bishop. Cute couple, right? They started dating when Charmin was 19. Bishop is 5 years older. Little did they know where their lives would take them. Were they actually meant for each other after all? The couple had been dating for 7 months. They even worked together. They both worked in recruitment. They would take the train into work together in the mornings. Sadly, this would be exactly where their lives would change. Charmin has a health issue. She has epilepsy. She was diagnosed with it at 14 years old, but it hadn't had too much of an impact on her life. Sadly, that was about to change, and it would end up leaving her boyfriend gasping for air. The couple, who live in England, got on a commuter train together. They were traveling from Tunbridge Wells in Kent to London, heading to work. Little did they know how much this trip was going to impact them. Charmin suffered a seizure on the train. But not just one, she suffered a series of seizures. Her eyes glazed over. Her body went limp. Her boyfriend had no idea what to do, but he knew he would stay by her side for as long as she needed. Luckily, Rich was right there. He was able to support Charmin until the couple got to the station. He helped her until the seizures ended. Little did he realize, their problems were only beginning. When they got to the station, Rich was the one who called Jess's parents. They scrambled to get there. When they got in, Jess's mom ran towards her. She hugged her and asked if she was okay. But the response she got was not what she was expecting. Charmin didn't recognize her own mother. She was hugging me and asking if I was okay, but I just stared back at her blankly. She kept saying she was my mom, Charmin said. But no matter what her mother said, she didn't recognize her. And her mother wouldn't be the only one that she didn't recognize. Charmin's mother needed to convince her she was actually her mother. So she did the easiest thing she could think of. She got out her phone and showed Charmin a picture of the two together. But the two had an even bigger shock in store. Charmin couldn't even recognize herself. I found a mirror and looked at my reflection, but it was like I was looking at a stranger. I did match the person in the photos, though, so I agreed to go home with my parents, Charmin said. Mum put a hand on my knee, but I pushed it off. It felt weird to be touched by a stranger. I was terrified. I had no idea who anyone was. Everyone was a stranger to me. I didn't even know my own name, Charmin said. I remember boarding the train that day in March, but that's it. Did she even remember who was on that train with her? Charmin's parents took her home. But when she got there, she didn't remember anything. She couldn't even recognize their house. My mum gave me a tour but nothing came back to me, she said. In an instant, her whole life was a blank state. Charmin's mother took her to the National Hospital for Neurology and Neurosurgery in London. But the prognosis wasn't promising. They said it could take up to 6 months for her memory to return. But that was a best-case scenario. There was even worse news. There was a chance her memory might not return at all. Doctors couldn't be sure what would happen. My head was spinning, it felt like I was in a horror film, Charmin said. And ultimately, the monster in this horror movie was her own brain. Charmin had to relearn life skills. My parents taught me how to cook again, she said. But it wasn't just life skills she needed to relearn. It was things about herself. My parents told me what TV I liked and how I liked to dress. She couldn't even remember her preferences in clothes, so there was no chance she could remember what made her like her boyfriend in the first place. What about her boyfriend, the gallant hero who had helped her on the train? Charmin couldn't remember him either. Which isn't surprising, given she couldn't remember her parents. But it wasn't only that she couldn't remember. It got worse than that. My parents invited Rich over but I didn't know him, she said. When they left me alone with him, I was really scared. I remember at one point I was left on my own with him and hated it. I didn't know him but he was acting like we were in love. Charmin wasn't happy with Rich. So, 2 weeks later, she broke up with him. Rich was devastated. He looked so hurt, Charmin said. After everything that she had put him through, Charmin couldn't even bring herself to give her boyfriend the benefit of the doubt for more than a fortnight. But Rich wasn't about to give up that easily. Rich Bishop wasn't about to give up his girlfriend without a fight. He made a promise to Charmin. He was going to help her remember how great they were together. Even though she kicked him to the curb because they didn't immediately click, he was not going to give up on her. He had a plan. Rich had a mission: to make Charmin fall in love with him again. So he began to take her on dates. He took her on walks in the park. He took her back to her favorite restaurants. He told her stories about their past. But, with what little she remembered about herself, would it even be possible to remind her what she liked about her boyfriend? And how did Charmin respond? He was so patient with me, so sweet, I couldn't help but fall for him, she said. I don't remember the first time I fell in love with Rich, but I do remember the second. It turns out that she could remember her preferences after all. As her confidence came back, Charmin started to return to a regular life and routine. She got a job again. But she no longer works in recruitment. She works at a call center. She still struggles, though. And her relationship isn't the only thing that has taken a toll. Social situations are still stressful for Charmin. People I'd known for years would approach me and start chatting, Charmin said. It was stressful admitting I had no idea who they were. It's hard to explain losing 19 years' experience. If she didn't remember her own boyfriend, there's no way she could remember classmates from high school. Charmin may never regain her memory of her first 19 years of being alive. But that's not the worst part. Charmin explained, doctors say there's a 50% chance I could lose my memory all over again. It's a scary prospect, but there is one upside. No matter what happens, Rich is by her side. And Charmin can take confidence in that. Rich was able to make me fall in love with him twice, she said. So I know he could do it again.